Good.
Up to you. You can stand up and walk around. Be comfortable.
Okay, aloha mai kako. My name is Stephen Robello. I am president of Hui Aloha Aina o Honolulu. Hui Aloha Aina was an organization that was started by Kupuna back in the 1890s to protest the annexation movement of the insurgents. Anyway, we are pleased. We have monthly presentations, but lately it's been bi-monthly because Lynette's just been busy booking all these different guest speakers. Tonight we are pleased to have Deborah Day, who is in town, and her passion is on the Kawaiahao Girls Seminary from 1890 to 93. I think you'll find it very interesting, so please give a warm welcome for Deborah.
I'm delighted to be here. I'm Deborah Day. I'm an archivist from San Diego, California. And in 2007, I was archivist of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography, which looks like this. And my job there was to collect unpublished material, manuscript correspondence, photographs, oral history interviews that document the history of oceanography in the United States. I spent a great deal of time looking for the early founders of the institution and trying to locate their collections. And so I was particularly interested in this man. This is Charles Atwood Kofoid. He was the chair of the Department of Biology at Berkeley for 35 years, and he was one of the founders of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. So I did my research, I tracked his genealogy, I found his family, and I asked them if they had any papers that survived. And they told me that they did not, but that they would search the attic. And when they searched the attic, they found 5 trunks and more of material. And they very kindly agreed to give it to the archives of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. They boxed it up, and it came down to me. Now, I, of course, was interested in oceanography. I was particularly interested in his cruises. He was on the Eastern Pacific, Tropical Eastern Pacific Expedition of 1905 with Alexander Agassiz, and I was very interested to find materials on the cruise there. But there was a big surprise in the collection. I found the letters of his wife. This is Carrie Prudence Winter. Before they married, he was a graduate student in biology at the Museum of Comparative Zoology in Harvard, and she came to Honolulu to teach school at the Kawaiahao Female Seminary, which is just down the street from us. They were separated for 3.5 years, and during that period, on every steamer, their letters exchanged. And fortunately, both sides of the correspondence survived. And I was delighted with this material, but I knew that it was sitting in the middle of an archives dedicated to the history of oceanography. And I was concerned that people interested in Hawaii might not actually find this material. And so it seemed to me to be a very good idea to do transcriptions, begin doing transcriptions of some of the letters, and decide if I might write an article or something about the collection in order to bring Hawaiians over to San Diego to use the material. The material was so good that I decided that I ought to do a selection of letters in the form of a book. And luckily, I published the book of Miss Winter's letters in 2012, which I wrote with my co-author, Sandra Figueroa. This is what the book looks like. Of course, many of the foreign teachers in Hawaii at that time recorded their experiences here in letters, diaries, and photographs. But Miss Winter's letters are particularly extensive and almost complete. Not one of them is missing. She numbered her letters, so it was possible to figure this out. They were all found in their original envelope. The only thing that was missing was the Hawaiian stamp. One of the little boys in the family discovered them and carefully removed them. But if you're an archivist, you know that often what happens is people remove the stamps and throw the letters away. So I'm very indebted to this little July 1893. And Miss Winter's letters also included something very, very precious, a list of her students. She carefully wrote down each of their names. It's rare and wonderful to have such a complete manuscript collection, but it also presents a really terrible challenge. Miss Winter was an inexperienced American woman in her 20s. She spoke and wrote only in English. It was essential that the book include a Hawaiian perspective, and it was difficult to see exactly how we could integrate this into the book. We tried to do it in two ways. The first was that Miss Winter had carefully kept examples of the students' handwriting. And one of the assignments that they had was to write about their life in school between this period of 1890 and 1893. And so we decided that those essays would appear in the center. And since we had a list of the students, I thought what a better idea than to have an index that's a who's who of everybody mentioned in the book that would include very short biographies of everyone, and especially the girls. So I was able to develop a list of 97 students, 97 girls who were students at this seminary, and I began to work one by one to see if I could find their full name. I want to start by thanking the archives and the people who have helped, especially CP, Laurel Douglas of Maui, who has been my advisor since 2009. I have extensively used archives here, including Hawaii Historical Society, Hawaii Historical Society, the Hawaiian Mission Children's Society Library, the Hawaiian State Archive, the State Library, Ulukau, which of course is just wonderful, the Hawaiian State Judiciary Court Records from the University of Hawaii Law Library. Would not have been possible for anything were it not for these archives. This is the first time I've actually presented my research in front of an audience, and it's a great privilege to do so, especially on the grounds of the Leilani Palace and right next door to the archives, which is where I started this work. I am delighted to speak to you because I need your help. I am very interested, as you are, in the political views and activities of Hawaiian women of this generation. I need help locating the families of the students I have been able to identify, and I need advice on properly interpreting some of the sources that I found. Like Ms. Winter, I work only in English, and other researchers who have more language skills, especially Hawaiian language skills, could read a great deal more than I can, especially in the court records and in the newspaper records in Hawaiian language. So I can only progress so far, and then other younger people with better language skills will have to push the work on from there. The original student records of Kawaiahao Female Seminary are missing. They would have listed each child who attended the seminary from its beginnings in 1865 to 1908, when the old seminary on South King Street, right across from the Kawaiahao Church, was closed and the school became part of the new institution. So I began with Ms. Winter's list of students from 1898 to 1993. This is a photograph of the students in their uniforms, sitting in front of the seminary building. These young ladies all made the uniforms themselves. This was part of their sewing class. This is a bad representation of Miss Winter's list of students. It's in pencil on old paper, but you can read it from the original. It says, girls in my room in 3 years, starting with September 1890, Lucia Halei, Emma I, Miriam Tiamoku, Sarah Kapalapua. That says out Hawaii. That means she's left the institution and returned home to Hawaii. Caroline David, out Honolulu. Rose Kapalapua, out Hawaii. Annie Wong, and so the list of students here, she listed over 50. Since the original records did not survive, this list was therefore quite unique and formed the basis of the beginning of my work. There's also a published 1882 circular of Kawaiahao Seminary, which lists the pupils of that time. So that is another source. And I've used other sources, like this photograph, to build a list of the scholars at Kawaiahao Seminary. My goal is to follow the lives of the Kawaiahao students in hopes that they will lead me to a better understanding of the lives of the women, of Hawaiian women and girls of this generation. My plan is very simple: identify the students of Kawaiahao Seminary with their full Hawaiian names, build a biography of each student working with primary sources and from interviews with their families, study the records of the 97 women and girls collectively and statistically, and see if there are similarities or differences that might illuminate the particular life experience of this generation of children, as opposed to those who came before and after. I've developed a list of the 97 women I seek, and I printed out a bunch of copies on the back. And also Dr. Cruz has an electronic list, so if you'd like to get in touch with her, she can send it to you. You'll notice that the ones in black print are women that I've identified. The ones that are in gray print, I know nothing. I've been able to find some information on 80% of the girls, but I'm still missing 20%. These women were born between 1865 and 1889. They came of age at the time of the Bayonet Constitution and the coup d'etat that overthrew the government. The events of those days sharply impacted their lives. While many of the women that I studied died young, Lydia Oholo lived longest of all of the classmates and died in 1970. So there is a possibility that I can find the families that possibly even you are related to some of these.
You just have to look for Jeffrey on Papa Finance. Alfred
Ah, good. Thank you. Thank you. I hope to hear more from all of you about that, and please jump in. I also have a pack of my cards with my email information. Yeah. So please help yourself and email me or call me if you have information. Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes, she was.
That's a betrayal.
Yes.
We were best the author interviewed after.
Yes. I believe that's Sandy Gamera, who had got a recording of one part of his interview.
I know.
Yes.
What's the point? It was basically somewhere.
Yes.
The promise.
Yes. Yes, I know that story. And that interview is very important because she does mention Kawaiahao Seminary, where she attended before she was a man named Girls. This is a photograph of 32 of the students from Kawaiahao Seminary from the Hawaiian Mission Children's Society Library. They're standing in front of the seminary building, and you will notice that most of the students are identified by name, which is why this photograph is so very important. That's quite unusual. I have many pictures of the seminary and the children at the seminary, but usually the young women are not identified by name. So let me use this photograph to illustrate my research. Omalu Lydia Kanoa is the little girl sitting right in the center. Says Noah from the little girl right there. Her granddaughter told me that she was born on November 8, 1880, and attended St. Andrew's Priory. So she was at Kawaiahao Seminary for about 5 years. She was a daughter of Paul Kanoa, governor of Kauai and member of the government in the House of Nova. The Kanoa family has a very ancient genealogy. I'm sure many of you know them. How old does she look to you? I think she's about 5 in that photograph. That would make the photograph 1885. A program for the Kawaiahao Seminary closing exercises on June 4, 1890 lists Miss Kanoa, so this photograph must have been taken between 1885 and 1890. But the names in the photo were added much later. We know that because in 2 instances, the identifier didn't know the full name of one of the girls, and so has written her married name. So Miss Kanoa married Charles Conrad Fruiter of the Hawaiian Band in 1898, so it's after that. And Kalola, Mrs. H.W. Kinney, this woman here, she was born in 1879, and she married in 1904. So the names were written on the photograph after that marriage date. They must have been written after 1904. Kololo is very important because Helen Kololo Wahilani Kahulehilu, at age 19, was a signatory of the Anti-Taxation Commission of 1897. The biographies of the students at Kawaiahao paint a picture of Hawaiian society at this very interesting time. So I'm going to start by giving you the biographies of 2 sets of sisters, one set from Honolulu and one set from Hawaii, to give you a feeling of what the biographies might be able to tell us. I want to start with Margaret Powers. Margaret Powers is in the second row. She's turning her eyes to the side. She has a little dark color. You can identify her there. Margaret Powers was born on August 12, 1873 in Honolulu. She was the second daughter of an American seaman, Aaron R. Powers, and a Maui girl, Mary Frances. Her older sister was Emma, born about 1871. The parents were married in Honolulu on May 11, 1870, and were members of the Fort Street Church. Captain Powers had been in Hawaii for a considerable time and was master of a series of small schooners, including the Cape Lee, the Moi, and the Kamo. The family resided on Queen Street. And in 1875, the Hawaiian Gazette reported that Captain Powers had taken all of the family money and deserted his wife and 2 little children. And that's totally wrong. That did not happen. Thank you. Mo'i. I appreciate it.
Deborah, could you speak a little louder?
I will speak a little.
Thank you.
Yes. What actually happened, I believe, is that Captain Powers took the family money and went to the West Coast to purchase a new schooner, which he named the Iolani, in partnership with Frank Cook. On February 13, 1877, the Iolani foundered in the Molokai Channel. 2 people drowned, Captain Powers and a seaman named John Adams. Like many sailors at that time, Captain Powers could not swim. Captain Powers died without a will, and his assets were placed in probate according to the laws of the kingdom, under an administrator, William O. Smith. You know Smith as the law partner of Lorne Thurston, both drafters of the Bayonet Constitution and members of the Committee of Safety, complicit in the overthrow of 1893. In accordance to the law at that time, 1/3 of the captain's assets were set aside, after all debts were paid, for his widow. The rest of the assets, which were under $2,000, were managed by Smith, who also served as a guardian for the 2 little girls, Emma and Maria. He placed them in Kawaiahao Seminary in April 1877, just weeks after their father's death. Their mother would have had very little say in the matter, and that was very common. Their mother had been very ill and was suspected of possibly having she was taken having She was sent to the hospital and examined by doctors and released, but nevertheless, this put her in a position where she did not have power with the guardianship. But there's an interesting name change here. The Powers family knew the child as Maria, but when she was put into Kawaiahao Seminary, she was called Margaret. So I think it's possible that they even changed the name. On October 24, 1881, Helen S. Norton, who was then principal of the seminary, noted in her diary that Mrs. Powers had come to visit her daughters at the school. And Mrs. Powers asked Margaret about a spot on her sister's hip. The principal sent for Mr. Smith, the guardian, and he sent for Nathaniel Bright Emerson, a doctor, who diagnosed this as incipient leprosy. Emerson was the son of one of the early Protestant missionaries to Hawaii and had a medical degree from New York. In 1878, he returned to Hawaii to work at Alii. Emma was sent to Alii, accompanied by her mother. In 1891, Ida Pope, principal of Kawaiahao Seminary, visited Emma Kawaiahao, where she lived with her husband, William J. Ferry, and their son. Ferry was the first assistant superintendent of the settlement. Meanwhile, Margaret remained at Kawaiahao Seminary for another 15 years. She won the seminary competition for the best essay on her life in school in 1891. The essay entitled Changes at the Seminary was published in the Hawaiian Gazette. She trained as a teacher, and in 1892, she was appointed to the Makapalas English School in Makapala. Her classmates all walked down to the steamer and sang her off the ferry, singing Oe, Aloha Ina Oi. She was a model student and a deeply committed Christian. She married Frederick Waldron at Kahala in 1897. Then she sued her guardian and tried to recover the money from her father's estate. I find that many of the girls at the school found it necessary to sue their guardian. From 1913 to 1938, she became known as Mother Waldron, so she is well known to you. Right. She became known as a teacher at the Pohukaina School in Honolulu. Eleanor Heavey mentions her in the 1997 oral history at UH Manoa, remembering Kaka'a. So I will publish that. I will just read you a section from her interview. She was a bulldog. She always went after the boys that got into mischief and go help them get out of the jail and bail them out and that kind of stuff. See, that's why they loved her. Mother Waldron had an iron hand. Kailo Ho also agreed in his interview. He said, well, she was a big woman, big jowls like a bulldog, rough, big, I would say almost 300 pounds. And she taught 4th grade at Pohukaina School. You got naughty, quick principal spank you with a hairbrush. You got worse, you go see Mother Waldron, she worked you over. In 1914, she joined a celebration of the 50th anniversary of Kawaiahao Seminary at Midpack Institute and gave a speech recalling her life in the school. Her obituary in 1936 calls her friend of the poor. She was survived by 3 daughters, many grandchildren. Her sister, Emma Powers, lived a long life in Molokai. After the death of her first husband, she married Joseph Kamakawili and is listed as an importer of kayak in the Independent in 1901. She was allowed to return to Honolulu briefly, which is very unusual, a great privilege for the unfortunate one. I have no information on her date of death. I have no information on the location. The second set of sisters I wish to tell you about are from Kauai, Rose and Sarah Kapalaki.
Excuse me. Repeat that name or spell that.
Rose and Sarah, and the last name is Kapalehua, Kapalehua. Kapaleko. Kapalu. Okay, let me try it again because the family has told me that her full name was Sarah Kapaleku Mueva. Maewa. She was from Hawaii and is known to the family as Tutukela. Tutukela, K-E-L-A, is the name by which her family knew her. Miss Kapalakua was born in Wailua, Hawaii, on June the 4th, 1872. Her older siblings are mentioned in a guardianship document from the Fifth Circuit Court in Kauai as the children of Papa Lehua and his wife Maile, late of Wailua. Her father came from Kau and Kona, but went to Kauai to be close to the royal family. After the death of both of her parents, the children were placed under the guardianship of Carl Eisenberg until 1896, when he passed it to C.H. Bishop of Lehua. Mother Rice asked Miss Kapalakua if she wished to come to Honolulu to study at Kawaiahao Seminary. Her older sister Rose was already at school, so Sarah came to the seminary, and she was still there in 1890, but home in Lehua in 1891, when she wrote a letter to her school classmate and best friend Escalona. Luckily, that letter had survived. Kawaiahao Seminary encouraged students to write letters to improve their penmanship, and Miss Kapalakua was distinguished at the school for her particularly beautiful handwriting. She married Charles Lono Kele Koma, a policeman and later captain of police at Kapa'a. She left the Protestant Mission Church and joined the LDS, and she had one son, hers for only a short time, according to the family memorial. She was good to any child who needed food or love. She cared for the missionaries of her church like her own sons. And she was first secretary and later president of the LDS Relief Society at Kapa'a. Her summer vacations were spent ferrying people across the Wailua River. There was a rope stretched across the river, and people stood in the middle on a flat-bottom barge, and she pulled them across the river. The work was very hard, it was tiring, and there was very small. In 1914, her family received homestead lands in Kapa'a. In 1922, Princess Kalani Aniole visited Kauai to organize Hawaiian women into an auxiliary club of the Republican Party. Mrs. Kele Koma attended her speech in Wailua, which was, of course, in Hawaiian, and became an officer of the Republican Club, called to organize the women. She died in her sleep on October 16, 1937. She used her particular handwriting, her lovely penmanship, to support her church, relieve those in need, and to politically organize the Hawaiian women of Kapa'a under the guidance of Prince Kukio. The students of Kawaiahao Seminary were not average Hawaiians and cannot represent all Hawaiian women of this time. The young ladies who were admitted to the seminary were expected to conform to very high standards of conduct, religious devotion, and academic achievement, including proficiency in the English language. Most of these children spoke Hawaiian at home. Some spoke Chinese. This group of women, this generation of women, were magnificent linguists. I have found women in this group who could speak 4 languages. 3 was very and there were some of them who picked up additional languages later in their life. The Kawaiahao Seminary students must have been unusually resilient because Many Hawaiian children could not adjust to life in the boarding school at that time. There were rebellions and there were incidents, and students left because, in the language of the principal, she was not right for school. School was not supposed to be right for the child. The child was supposed to be right for school. The school included several sisters of the Kawaiahao family, daughters of a clergyman and his wife, who were retainers to the royal family. Both father and mother died within a day of each other. The news of their deaths were brought by steamer to Oahu from another island and reached the seminary on March 29, 1891. Emma, the eldest of the Kawaiahao sisters, had already left the seminary. Anna left Kawaiahao Seminary in 1890 to join the industrial school for girls. Mariah Kahopika Kawaiahao, born in 1877, received the news of the death of her parents. And her little sister, Tonia, born about 1878, was at the seminary at the same time. Emma Kawaiahao is a signatory to the anti-annexation petition of 1897, and I believe that Mariah is also a signatory, but I'll show you an example of her handwriting in a few minutes. Tonia fought with the teachers and ran away from school in March 1893. She told her teacher, Miss Winter, it was stay in the seminary and die or leave, and I chose to leave. Queen Liliuokalani denied Mariah Kawaiahao after the death of the parents and suggested that she come out of the seminary. But Mariah replied that she had no good home to go to. And so the queen gave her land on Waikiki and chaperoned her very closely until 1900, when she granted permission to George Piltz, sea captain, who wished to court Mariah, and the two of them were married. So I was very keen to trace this particular family, and I managed to find a grandson in Honolulu and made an appointment to come and explore the history of this rebellious family. You know him. He was a physician, Dr. Kukuni Blaze. Kukuni told me about the Kawaiahao family, its health issues, and its early history. I filled him in on his rebellious times. We had a wonderful time. And I promised to try to find some information about the circumstances of the death of their parents. He was very close to his grandmother, and the history of his family was an important part of his own political resolve to foster the independence of Hawaii. An hour in his company brought a great deal of meaning to this research. He inspires me still today. Emma Kalaloi Akana is not in this photograph. She was born 1885 on Hawaii Island. Her father was Ning Ten Anden Achin Akana, and her mother was Kamala, known as Tamar Keopuolani Davis. In 1910, Emma married Henry R. Wassman in North Oahu. They had 7 children, and she was a midwife. Her grandson calls her church grandma for her devotion to her church. Her teachers described her as an advanced student, very quick in her study. Here is what her teacher, Miss Winter, wrote about her on November 27, 1890. She is a pretty, slender girl with nice, fine hair and good eyes. She has a good supply of clothing and dresses very well. I have seen her father when he has been here. He is a good Christian Chinaman of the better kind. He seems very fond of Emma and is one of the fathers who supports a daughter here in the school. Emma was talking to me one evening, and she said, You come from Connecticut, don't you? Do you know Edward Hubble? I wouldn't say that I did, but the name seemed very familiar to me. She then told me that her mother was a half-white, the daughter of Joseph Hubble, the brother of Edward Hubble. The mother, it seems, is an intelligent woman, can read and write, and takes several American papers. I have an idea that the Hubbles are people of wealth, and perhaps you can guess what I want. Will Papa please find out about this family? Isn't it queer, though? When I read this, I was trying very hard to find some information that would tell me how the girls felt about the school. We have a lot of letters from the teachers, but very few from them. Students at Kawaiahao did not initiate conversations with their teachers. It was almost always the other way around. The teachers were strict, and Miss Winter could be very frosty. So what is it that Miss Akana is saying here? Does she want to look up her old relatives in Connecticut? I doubt it. Was she just making conversation? I don't think so. I think she was trying to get a message through to her teacher. I think what she was trying to say is, we are not so different from you. In order to evaluate the meaning of this conversation and some of the other conversations that are mentioned in the teacher's letters, we need to understand the students and their families. Emma Akana and her mother were both signatories to the anti-annexation petition of 1897. But there's a problem with this passage. Emma Akana's mother was born in 1859, the daughter of Charles Davis. The family is well known, and they have shared their genealogy online. No Hubbles that I can. There were 9 Emmas at Kawaiahao Seminary at this period of time. So I'm doing research to find out if Miss Winter made a misidentification. I'm trying to find Hubbles in other genealogies of the Hawaiian students. See if I can work that out. As I study the Kawaiahao Seminary students individually, I also study them collectively and statistically. And this often guides my research. It also helps me formulate questions that then I can ask the family. The birthplace of 69 of the 97 students on my list is known. Of these, 30 were born in Oahu, 16 born in Hawaii, 8 born Maui, 7 born on Hawaii Island, 2 born on Molokai. 4 were born in the South Seas, including 2 from the Gilbert Islands and 1 from the Marshall Islands. 1 was born in Canada, and 1 was born in Germany. The students born in the South Pacific were daughters of Hawaiian clergy serving as missionaries there. 10% of the students at Kawaiahao were daughters of Protestant clergy. The Hawaiian Protestant clergy were well acquainted with each other through the Hawaiian Evangelical Association, the HEA. And when a clergyman died, the HEA and its mission women's organizations tried to help the orphans. Fathers of Kawaiahao Seminary students also included numerous sea captains. The sea captains knew each other through a number of organizations, including the Masons. And they also tried to help the children of deceased sea captains as well. The purpose of Kawaiahao Female Seminary was to educate the Hawaii Native and provide a home and education for the daughters of Protestant clergymen. Most of the students were from Hawaiian Christian families of long standing. Several of the students were daughters of women who themselves had attended this seminary or other seminaries in the island. And among the 97 students on my list, from 1890 to 1893, I have found 11 sets of sisters, 6 sets of cousins, 1 aunt and niece in the seminary at the same time, and many other relationships among the young ladies. So family ties to the school were very strong and multi-generational. 25% of the students on my list lost one or both parents before or during their school year. 10 of the students died before the age of 22. Health was a big issue at school, as it was in all of Hawaii at that time, and every child on my list experienced grief and loss at an early age. Many later also lost spouses and children. Many of the Kawaiahao students left the Protestant Mission Church as adults. A significant number joined Mormon churches, either the LDS or the RLDS. Some had no religious affiliation as adults. This is consistent with the finding of some historians, and here I will mention Ron Williams, that some Hawaiians of this generation drifted away from HEA Protestant church. More than half of the students who lived to maturity married. Kawaiahao Seminary prepared its students for marriage, preferably to clergymen or to young men who were active members of the Protestant church. School administrators and teachers thought that marriage would offer their students long-term protection and security. But when you study probate and divorce records, you find the result. 20% were widowed or divorced and left with young families. However, several women in this photograph married men who were immensely wealthy, and their families are very interesting as well. It's not a charity school. The school offered teacher training, and 21 of the students became teachers. Most of the women worked at public schools under the direction of the Department of Public Instruction, which was part of the government. Some of the students taught in kindergarten and were supported by the Free Kindergarten Association and the Women's Board of Mission. Teachers all trained together in normal school and were a tightly connected group. They met often at teacher meetings and they socialized together. They were quite a block. As Miss Winter's letters testify, the students at the school were loyal to the kingdom. Many of the students were daughters of courtiers, officials, and employees of the Kawaiahao family, and were personally acquainted with King Lulu Okolani. They spoke and acted as loyal subjects of the kings and queens of Hawaii. Ron also described in his dissertation an 1886 rebellion of the Kawaiahao Seminary students. Princess Liliuokalani personally invited the students of Kawaiahao Seminary to march in the Golden Jubilee of Kalakau's 50th birthday on November 16, 1886. However, the Board of Trustees forbade them to march. The students were vocal in their displeasure, and the board members all resigned. These students were very strongly affiliated with the country. More difficult to discern what their political views were after they left school. 6 of the women students from Oahu are definitely signatories on the anti-annexation petition. 2 of the students from Hawaii Island are also signatories. And there are others. Signatories Mary Breed and Mariah H. Kawaiahao may or may not be Kawaiahao students with similar names. I think they probably are. But in my case, I try very much to get in touch with them and ask them to. As you know, some women signed with only a single name. So as I've studied the list, I found fathers, mothers, brothers, and sisters among the signatories, and the family names of students appear frequently on the petition. Ahia, Noah, Tikiko. You might expect that the Kawaiahao Seminary students who remained HEA Protestant church members would stay close to mission society. And you might expect that the Kawaiahao Seminary students who were signatories to the anti-annexation petition of 1897 would distance themselves from this school and from the Protestant mission society. But that's not what happened. It's a jumble, and so I have to discuss this slowly and carefully. When I examine the biographies of the girls, I find a very complex story. When the Kawaiahao Seminary students participated in political activity, they did it through women's organizations. Some participated in social and political events organized by Princess Kalani Ani. Some organized and joined women's clubs, alumni clubs, and professional women's clubs. The Mormon converts tended to be very active in their church and through the women's organization of their church. The LDS and the RLDS students were the first ones to actually distance themselves from the school. They kept their student friends, their classmates, but they did not attend alumni school. There's clearly a difference between the Kawaiahao Seminary alumni on Oahu and those who lived abroad or on other islands. 6 of the girls of my 97 permanently left the island and settled in the United States. The students who lived on Oahu continued to be affiliated with the Mission Women's organizations, even when friends and family were committed to the restoration of the kingdom. So they did not leave the mission organizations in the same way that some left the Protestant mission church. There are several examples. Here's one. Deborah Heine used to make fun of the old maids who taught her at Kawaiahao Seminary, and she was such a gifted mimic that she made them laugh. The daughter of a heroic Protestant clergyman to the South Pacific Islands, she was not a church member as an adult, but she sent her daughters to Mid-Pacific for their education. Alice Kalahekiola Lewis Ordway was one of a group of Hawaiian women, mostly teachers, affiliated with the Department of Public Instruction, who visited the mainland in 1901. The Department of Public Instruction asked for funds from the territorial government to send an exhibit and representatives of the Hawaiian people to the Pan-American Exhibition in Buffalo in 1901. That was one of the many World's Fairs that were held at the time. The women, including Mrs. Ordway, departed Honolulu by steamer in April 1901 and arrived in Buffalo in June. They were meant to represent true Kanaka hospitality and to counteract the vulgar impression made by Midway fluid. Their exhibit included examples of needlework and carpentry produced by children at the Hawaiian school. When her old friend, Kawaiahao Seminary teacher Terry Winter, came back to Honolulu in 1930, Mary Dillingham Freer, the wife of the 3rd Territorial Government, arranged for 2 Kawaiahao Seminary alumni to greet her steamer. Elizabeth Kolomoku Kahanu, Ann Skittle, and her classmate Eunice Cooney, William Rose, did so. Lizzie Kahanu, at age 19, was a signatory of the Anti-Annexation Petition. Eunice Cooney, Mrs. William Rose, had long since left the school for her own LDS church. Annie Wong was born in Canada in 1878 to a Chinese family that entered Hawaii in 1882. That can't be her full name, but I have not located her family, so I cannot give you the Chinese name. Her brother, Charles A. Wong, was a graduate of Oahu College and Harvard College class of 1911. He was a prominent banker in Honolulu. Family attended the Chinese church on 4th Street, and F.W. Damon himself arranged for Miss Wong to be admitted to Kawaiahao Seminary. After leaving school, Miss Wong remained closely affiliated with the Women's Board of Missions and with the Free Kindergarten Association of Honolulu. She taught at their Chinese kindergarten, and one Honolulu directory lists her as a teacher in the Chinese kindergarten set up at Relief Camp No. 2 on Vineyard Street. After the plague outbreak and the Chinatown fire of January 1900, homeless residents in Honolulu were sent to relief camps or detention camps, as they were called in the newspaper. Some were quarantined. These camps were very dreary, fearful places, and the Free Kindergarten Association decided to organize kindergartens at the camp in order to make the children feel perhaps a little better. Their parents did not allow them. So Miss Wong was at Relief Camp number 2 on Vineyard Street, working as a translator and teacher among the Chinese refugees. What was she thinking? I am trying very hard to locate her family because Miss Wong died at the age of 25 in 1983. And I need to learn more about her. So did these women, some of whom signed the petition of 1897, support the territorial government and mission schools, or did they simply maintain their social ties with their schoolmates? One has to study their clubs and affiliations with the Kawaiahao Seminary in order to assess their political activities later in life and their loyalty. Few of the Kawaiahao Seminary students lived long enough to vote. The Organic Act of 1900 made Hawaii territory American and its citizens American citizens. However, some of the Kawaiahao students were born outside the island or were of Asian ancestry, and so they would not have become citizens at that time. American women could not vote until 1920, and Hawaiian women could not vote for president or congressional representatives until 1959. Of those for whom I have death dates, only 32 of the students were still living in 1920. By 1959, only 5 of the Kawaiahao students remained alive to exercise their full voting. Although their voting rights were restricted, the Kawaiahao Seminary students were politically active. We may be able to infer their political opinions from their associations, and for this reason, I collect information on the political affiliation of their family members. Catherine Keolani Clark, Mrs. William Polo Rathburn, was the daughter of another sea captain, Captain Thomas Clark, a signatory to the anti-annexation petition. Her family friends included John Henry Wise and the Abraham Fernandez family. These names will be known to you as participants in the rebellion of 1895. Both of them spent time in prison. Edward Ingham, the husband of Emily K. Bartholomew, was a Mormon missionary and a Democrat who ran for office unsuccessfully in Honolulu in 1908. He was so vilified in the newspapers that the Inghams left Hawaii permanently, settling in Oakland, California. These two women were affiliated with people who opposed the Republican leaders of the territory of Hawaii. Lydia Aholo and Myra Kalapanio signed the anti-annexation petition together. And I often see this happening. The names of classmates went together to sign the petition. Very interesting. I think what happened is in those days, young ladies did not walk down Honolulu company. They were not married. And so they brought a friend with them. And often when I can find one name on the petition, find right now. It's not surprising that the two of them went together because Myra Kalapanio's mother was the Queen's lady in waiting, and her stepfather was Joseph Eleluhe, the Queen's secretary. You may know her by her married name, Myra Eleluhe Ioni. The family is very famous for music. In 1898, she accompanied Queen Liliuokalani on a trip to the United States to counteract the anti-annexation petition propaganda of the Republic of Hawaii. Later, she was a retainer in the household of Prince Pio and returned to Washington, and he went there as a representative. She was a resolute loyalist and a keen observer of the changing social position of women of Hawaiian nationality and their experiences on the mainland. So I have found that the Kawaiahao Seminary students included many individuals with lifelong loyalty to the kingdom. They acted on that loyalty by signing the petitions, by joining patriotic organizations and clubs, by associating with the leaders of the Native Hawaiian community, and by using their talents to support and sustain Hawaiian culture and language. The teachers, in particular, shared their experience with Hawaiian children of the next generation and left a lasting impression. The Kawaiahao Seminary students included others whose political thoughts were not expressed or simply not recorded in their family's memory. It is often the grandchildren who remember the Kawaiahao Seminary students best, and so I try to find them wherever I can, even though most are now quite elderly. Yet when I ask them about the political views of their grandmothers, many answer that they don't know, or that their grandmother refused to talk about the events of 1887. The Kawaiahao Seminary students didn't talk to their children about political issues. Many of the grandchildren I interviewed have never even heard of Kawaiahao Seminary. There is an exception, however. The students who knew and remembered Queen Alii shared their memories of the Queen with their children. I hear a lot about the Queen. The word strict keeps coming up. Grandmother was loving but strict. The school teachers had an iron hand. These women are remembered by their families as resolute and tough. Their personalities sometimes included the characteristics of their missionary teachers. I always ask what the grandmother cooked for them, and sometimes you hear that it's a roast and pudding, things that they would have been taught in school. They expected obedience from their children. Homalu Lydia Kanoa, Mrs. Kruger, had 15 children. She raised all but one who died at the age of 18. She had 11 sons and 4 daughters. She was a very small woman. Her grandchildren recall that she had a lovely singing voice and was an endearingly intuitive person, but her discipline was absolute. If her sons misbehaved, the grandchildren tell me, she had only to lift her finger a little bit from her lap to command their obedience into late. I searched for the court records, marriage records, photographs, and letters that document the lives of these 97 Hawaiian women of the Revolution period. I followed their steps. I looked for their signatures and handwriting. I interviewed their families. And I hope that if I am still in concentrate, I may learn a little bit more about the lives of Hawaiian women at this time of great change. I hope that you will join me in the search and point out my mistakes. I have copies of my list of students, and of course, Dr. Cruz also has an electronic copy that I would love to share with you. And my contact information is on my card in the back of the room. I don't text, so I would appreciate emails and phone calls. I want to thank Dr. Lynette Iladi Cruz for inviting me to speak. It is such a pleasure. Mahalo. Three more slides I want to show you. These are the girls who are trained in music. Again, you can see that they are all in their uniforms. This is an example of a license to marry. This is where I get most of the full Hawaiian names. So this is Elizabeth Kalamoku Kahana, who is one of the signatories of the anti-annexation. And this is the source where I was able to find her. These are a couple of the petitions, and you will see here, Mrs. Kahana's name is right at the bottom there. There she is, right? And right above her is Helen Palolo Wahalai. One of the nice things about having the age here is that I can go through. I know that these girls at the time of the petition were 17 to 25 years. And once I have the name of one, I check all of the other names related. Over here, you can see Myra, California, very big, very tiny. Miss Lydia Apollo. Again, go 2 by 2. Some of them went with their mothers as well. This is an interesting one. Remember Kawaiahao, who was the grandmother of Kakuni Blaisdell. There is a signature over here on the left that you will see that looks to me like Mariah H4, but her middle initial should have been a K. So what I did is I have examples of her homework, and you can compare her signature here to the homework signature up there on the right. I think the two are similar. Right? But I really need someone who is trained in handwriting to confirm that. And I want to get back in touch with the family again because maybe they know this perfectly well. And they could simply. So this is the work that I'm doing in Hawaii this week. And I thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Very little.
They wouldn't cooperate or they didn't find it.
They would cooperate, but when I told them I had 97 names, they were a little bit surprised, and they were able to help me with that. But mostly, the problem for me is I live in California. I have a limited amount of time here. There are a lot of church records because they're a wonderful source. Right now, the source that I'm working with particularly is court records. I'm trying to find guardianship records and divorce records. Because I find that in the old days, they used to send a social worker if you were getting a divorce, and they would interview you about what happened, who lives in your home, and you get all sorts of family details in those files.
Social worker back.
Yeah, they had social workers back in the kingdom. I would not call them that. I would say in the time of the kingdom, they had busybodies. A lot of these were missionary ladies who went to find out what was wrong, and they would ask questions like, do you make warm food for your husband every night? They had a list of the responsibilities of a wife, and if you couldn't say that you did all of these things, then they would say you were partly at fault. And remember that the grounds for divorce in those times was very limited. It was either non-support or it was adultery. And so there are a lot of interesting things. Yes, please.
What was the age that they
That's interesting. They didn't get a graduation certificate. This was a seminary, it was not a high school. The school said that they accepted students from the age of 5. There were students that I found here as young as 3. The first children that I told you about, Mother Waldron, she and her sister came in at 3 and 5. There's an interesting newspaper article by C.M. Hyde, Reverend Hyde, who was president of the Board of Trustees. And he said that the families kept telling him that they wanted to send their children at the age of 9. And he wanted them at the age of 5. And he said that the problem was they could pick up all sorts of vicious habits. And I thought, what vicious habits can you get between the age of 3 and 9? And I think the idea is really to get them away from the church and get them into the school at a very
The reason why I asked that question was because great grandmother was from Honolulu. And I was told that they had to starting at 8 because actually they were leaving their family.
Some of these girls stayed at the seminary for a very, very long time. I mean, Mother Waldron was there for 15 years. And it's really extraordinary how long they were there. Others were only there for a couple of years. One girl arrived with a corset and 4 hats and stayed for 4 years. And she was trying to get her family center for social reasons. She was a wonderful. Just following their social lives and education. The other thing is they all knew each other. They all knew each other's families, and they were very, very good. Yes. Usually it was family circumstances. If they had a family to go to, then usually they left when they were about 18 or 20. They could leave at any time that they wanted, but usually they stayed. Yes.
Who paid for their schooling?
It varied.
The dad.
Yeah. Sometimes the families paid. It was during this period of time, 1890 to 1893. It was $50 a year. That's room, board, and tuition. Many of the students were paid for by their churches, and quite a few were members of the Lani Education Society, so that their tuition was paid for by the queen. And that was really quite an honor. I think the most important thing I found about the school is that the queen, as princess and queen, visited the school very frequently, had quiet conferences with the students, even sang to them. And so they knew her very, very well. And the students themselves were very famous for their music, and they were invited to attend the royal family palace. And they used to wear their best white clothes. They had to have a white dress for church. And they would make a long trail because there were 120 girls in the school at this period. Long trail down South King Street. And the gate was open for them so that they could sing for the kings and the queens. State occasions, during funerals.
I saw Sandra last week at
Yes.
EMEA about her book, Ida Mae Pope. How did those 5 trunks get to California? And I mean, there's an amazing amount of information that you are getting from those. How did they arrive there?
I'm not part of Sandra's book. She and I did this book together, and I did not work with her on the Ida Mae book.
But I understand both of that book also gleaned a lot of information from what was found in the end.
Yes, that's right. You mean how did Miss
How did
Winter's
those trunks get to California? And
Miss Winter took them on a steamer when she left Honolulu with her. She only those 5 trunks were all of the papers, but only one of the trunks contained her letters. So she had one trunk that she was here. But she was so poor, she couldn't go on the big steamer. She had to take a sailor. And it took her 3 weeks to get home because the winds were not very big. And then the lucky thing is the letters were in the actual trunk that she used to transport it, and the family has kept it.
Talk about this. Talking about.
In this school, yes. And it's one of the reasons that I think this book was worth printing, because Miss Winter described how she personally punished these girls. She did it with paddles and with brooms and with whips that were available in the school, even though the school had a policy trying not to do it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, and when I've read the letters of other teachers, they don't mention it, which I don't think that means it didn't happen at other periods of time. I think what happened is Miss Winter was trying to explain to her fiancé how difficult it was. And I think she was very sorry, but the truth is she behaved in ways that were really very
But ways that were acceptable at that time by those.
They were acceptable. That's right. Yes. It was it was acceptable. I mean, to the administrators of the school that she did this corporal punishment. It was not acceptable to anybody. Exceptional to all of us. But she didn't do it herself in secret. It was the school think they were aware that she was administering this function, and they must have.
You mentioned that grow together. But I have found because they went for and getting consent, that's like for that when I searched I thought all my people exciting. When I looked for one, I saw them all together. Okay.
That's thrilling,
So,
isn't it?
you know, there was family people together.
Yeah. I need to know more about how the petitions were actually transported and how people signed the name so that I can understand better what exactly happened. So, for instance, when Mariah Kawaiahao's signature appears there, the signatures around her name are all Hawaiian names. So does that mean that she was in a house with a large number of Hawaiian people?
Or they were in the line.
Or they were in line together. I don't know, and I need to study.
Or their neighbor was done
Right.
by neighbor.
Yes, but what did they do? Did they set up a table and everybody came? Or did they go door to door, or did this vary? Yes, Ron, please.
There were two little items branches in church. A lot of times you come up to each church that would have a branch field. So when the church held that Sunday service, it was like you see a lot of folks who were in the church.
Signing names.
But even like the play, the reenactment. So when the Aloha Aina, the Women's League would come out, the community, that's where the whole community would go in. So even though they might have come from different areas of the island, they would come in to sign. That's why you might find friends on the same list. So there's a play that.
Did address it.
How many years did it take to do your research and your thinking?
It took 3 years to write this book. And I've been working on it 6 years since, still trying to get more of the books. I think in the beginning I found the ones that were easy to find. And now I'm finding the ones that have difficult names, like Maria White. That's all I know her name. I'm at the point where I really need to start writing up this research, so I need to either give up on these 20. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for taking the time. Man, even in the 70s, there was talk of a battle with the principals. So, I mean,
Yeah. It's not acceptable, but that's
Yeah.
what happened.
that's what happened.
Right. We went to school with corporal punishment.
Yeah. So,
Acceptable.
some people liked it so much they went back again. Plenty of cake that we really need to get into the hands of those that want to consume some sugar, water. There are CDs in the back in case you want to make a donation of $1 for the CDs and some other educational information. When's the next presentation with them?
I forget.
Okay, we'll get it out through Facebook, emails, and the regular mechanism of dissemination. But thank you all for coming. Have safe travels back home, and hope to see you soon.